An Object of Love by Mary E. Wilkins, read for Love Stories Volume 5 by Michelle Fry, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. An Object of Love by Mary E. Wilkins. There were no clouds in the whole sky except a few bleak violet-colored ones in the west. Between them the sky showed a clear, cold yellow. The air was very still, and the trees stood out distinctly. "There's going to be a heavy frost, sure enough," said Ann Millet. "I have to get the squashes in." She stood in the door, surveying the look outside as she said this. Then she went in and presently emerged with a little black shawl pinned closely over her head and began work. This was a tiny white-painted house with a door and one window in front and a little piazza over which the roof jutted and on which the kitchen door opened on the rear corner. The squashes were piled up on this piazza in a great yellow and green heap. "A splendid lot they are," said Anne. "I'd orter be thankful." Anne always spoke of her obligations to duty and never seemed to think of herself as performing the duty itself. "I'd orter be thankful," said she always. Her shawl, pinned closely over her hair and ears, showed the small oval of her face. The greater part of it seemed to be taken up by a heavy forehead, from under which her deep-set blue eyes looked with a strange, solemn expression. She looked alike at everything, the clear, cold sky and the squashes, soberly and solemnly. This expression, taken in connection with her little, delicate old face, had something almost uncanny about it. Some people complained of feeling nervous when Anne looked at them. "That's Miss Stone comin'," said she. "Hope to goodness she won't stop and hinder me. Lord's sake, I orter have more patience." A tall, stooping figure came up the street and paused at her gate hesitatingly. "Good evening, Anne." "Good evening, Miss Stone. Come in, won't you?" Mrs. Stone came through the gate, walked up to the piazza, and stopped. "Getting in your squashes, ain't you?" "Yes, I didn't dare risk 'em out tonight. It's so cold. I left 'em out last year, and they got touched, and it about spoiled 'em." "Well, I should be kinder afraid to risk 'em. It's a good deal colder than I had any idea of when I come out. I thought I'd run over to Miss Maxwell's a minute, so I just clapped on this head tie and this little cape over my shoulders, and I'm chilled clean through. I don't know but I've took cold. Yes, I'd take 'em in. We got our'n in last week, such as they was. We ain't got more'n half as many as you have. I shouldn't think you could use 'em all, Anne." "Well, I do. I allers like squash, and Willie likes 'em too. You ought to see him brush around me, around and up his back, and purrin' when I'm a-scraping 'em out of the shell. He likes 'em better'n fresh meat." "Seems queer for a cat to like such things. Our'n won't touch 'em. He's awful dainty. How nice and big your cat looks a-settin' thar in the winder." "He's a-watchin' of me. He jumped up there just the minute I come out." "He's a good deal of company for you, ain't he?" "Yes, he is. What on earth I should do this long winter that's comin' without him, I don't know. Everybody wants something that's alive in the house." "That's so. Must be pretty lonesome for you, anyway. Ruth and me often speak of it when we look over here, especially in the winter season. Some of them awful stormy nights we have." "Well, I don't mean to complain anyway, or to be thankful. I got my Bible and Willie and a roof over my head and enough to eat and wear, and a good many folks have to be alone, as far as other folks is concerned, on this earth. And perhaps some other woman ain't lonesome because I am. Maybe she'd be one of the kind that didn't like cats and wouldn't have got along half as well as me. No, I got a good many mercies to be thankful for, more'n I deserve. I never orter complain." Well, if all of us looked at our mercies more'n our trials, we'd be a good deal happier. But sakes, I must be going. I'm catching cold, and I'm hindering you. It's supper time, too. You've got something cooking in the house that smells good. Yes, it's some stewed tomato. I allers like something I can eat butter and pepper on, such a night as this. Well, something of that kind is good. Good night, Anne. Good night, Miss Stone. Going to meeting tonight? I'm going if Ruth don't. One of us has to stay with the children, you know. Good night. Mrs. Stone had spoken in a very high-pitched tone all the while, and was somewhat deaf. She had spoken loudly and shrilly, too, so now there was a sudden lull, and one could hear a cricket chirping somewhere about the door. Mrs. Stone, pulling her tiny drab cape tighter across her stooping rounded shoulders, hitched rapidly down the street to her own home, which stood on the opposite side, a little below Anne's, and Anne went on tugging in her squashes. "I'm glad she's gone," she muttered, looking after Mrs. Stone's retreating figure. "I didn't know how to be hindered a minute. I ought to have more patience." She had to carry in the squashes one at a time. She was a little woman, and although she had been used to hard work all her life, it had not been of a kind to strengthen her muscles. She had been a dressmaker. So she stepped patiently into the kitchen with a squash, and out without one, then in again with one. She piled them up in a heap on the floor in a corner. "They'll have to go up on that shelf over the mantel," said she, "tomorrow. I can't get 'em up there tonight and go to meetin' nohow." She had a double shelf of unpainted pine rigged over the ordinary one for her squashes. After the squashes were all in, Anne took off her shawl and hung it on a nail behind the kitchen door. Then she set her bowl of smoking hot tomato stew on a little table between the windows and sat down contentedly. There was a white cloth on the table and some bread and butter and pie beside the stew. Anne looked at it solemnly. "I'd orter be thankful." That was her way of saying grace. Then she fell to eating with a relish. This solemn, spiritual-looking old woman loved her food and had a keen lookout for it. Perhaps she got a spiritual enjoyment out of it, too, besides the lower material one. Perhaps hot stewed tomatoes, made savory with butter and pepper and salt on a frosty November night, had for her a subtle flavor of home comfort and shelter and coziness, appealing to her imagination, besides the commoner one appealing to her palate. Before anything else, though, before seating herself, she had given her cat his saucer of warm milk in a snug corner by the stove. He was a beautiful little animal, with a handsome dark striped coat on his back and white paws and face. When he had finished lapping his milk, he came and stood beside his mistress's chair while she ate, and purred. He rarely mewed, and she gave him bits of bread from her plate now and then. She talked to him, too. "Nice, Willie," said she, "nice cat. Got up on the window to see me bring in the squashes, didn't he? There's a beautiful lot of 'em, and he shall have some stewed for his dinner tomorrow, so he shall." And the cat would purr and rub his soft coat against her and look as if he knew just what she meant. There was a prayer meeting in the church vestry that evening, and Anne Millett went. She never missed one. The minister, when he entered, always found her sitting there at the head of the third seat from the front, in the right-hand row, always in the same place, a meek, erect little figure in a poor, tidy black bonnet and an obsolete black coat, with no seam in the whole of the voluminous back. That had been the style of outside garments when Miss Millett had laid aside dressmaking, and she had never gone a step further in fashions.